And welcome back once again to Raise the Banner podcast. This is episode number 23, the Michael Jordan episode of the podcast. He raised a lot of those banners back in the day. You like what I did there?
Yeah. Hold on. I can't. It won't. 6. The 6.
Six.
Just like the
TB12
GOAT.
raised 7.
Well, 6
But
here, but yes, 7 total.
Once again here, Matt Couture. JR is unavailable tonight, but Benny Ballgame Dearth is here as usual. Ben, how you doing?
Good. Yeah, JR is otherwise located tonight. Just the two of us ready to go. Got a few things to talk about, so we can dive in.
Yep. So starting off, this will basically be a little bit of Red Sox, a good amount of Patriots, and that's probably about it for this week. But starting off with the Red Sox, I know we've kind of seen this coming. I've heard the talks about it for the last month or two, but it looks like the Boston Red Sox ownership group, Fenway Sports Group, is getting close to or closing into an agreement that they're going to be the main investor for basically become a partner in the PGA LIV Golf merger. It is going to be for around $3 billion. Yes, that's billion with a B. That's a lot of dollars. I don't know, I think you could put it up in, it's probably around, let's see, if the Red Sox payroll is $250 million average, it's not even close to that right now. The 250 average, what is that, about 12 years of Red Sox payroll?
Yeah, it's 12 times 12 times the current roughly. That's a little more than that. It's a little bit more than 12 times the assumed payroll limitation on the 2024 Red Sox.
So, I mean, big picture, we've talked about this before. People could tell us that they're not related, that Fenway Sports Group has their own, folders, essentially, for Red Sox, and then the Penguins, and then, now this. The reality is, it's very simple. The Penguins are not going to be buyers at the deadline, supposedly, according to reports, because they are not trying to invest in this current team because they view it as a, quote, soft rebuild year. Liverpool manager, basically, I think he stepped down. He's leaving Liverpool. Is that correct? I want to say he's leaving Liverpool. It made direct comments about Fenway Sports Group's commitment to invest in the ball club. The Boston Red Sox, after getting under the tax in 2023, had a strict budget of $225 million given to Chaim Bloom. And then they fired Chaim Bloom for not doing good enough, and then hired Craig Breslow, and now supposedly have a budget that will at most be 225, looks to be even less. What are your overall thoughts on this whole, storyline? How much do you buy in that connected? Because personally, me, like, even if you had a real argument to say they're not connected technically, the reality is, like,
they are.
Yeah, the reality is, like, the Fenway Sports Group decides how much money they want to invest in the Red Sox. John Henry, Tom Werner, they choose how much they want to invest in the Red Sox. It's an endless book. If they want to invest $500 million, they could invest $500 million in the Red Sox roster. So it's all up to them. So for when they turn and go and drop what looks to be, I don't know, probably north on their end, like $2 billion, it gets people a little bit squirmish.
Yeah, so I was looking up because I hadn't heard anything about Liverpool. So I guess the worst name of a manager I've ever heard, Jurgen Klopp, has announced he's going to resign as manager of Liverpool FC at the end of the season. So the search for that position is ongoing.
And Now he is seen to people to like keep people updated. He's seen as one of the best managers in soccer.
Yes,
He's
he is
not
very
like this like slouch guy.
no. He is the Bill Belichick of European football, but he's like half his age. But anyway, yeah. So I mean, obviously the optics are incredibly bad for the Sox. I mean, I kind of had raised some concerns of my own. I know we had talked about it long before the podcast had even, was even a twinkle in our eyes that the investment from John Henry and Fenway Sports Group into becoming part owner, are they simple majority or minority owners in the Penguins? I think it's like a slight
They're majority owners,
but I think it's a slight majority. Like I want to say they're somewhere in the 50s. I don't think they're like I don't think I think they're majority, but I don't know what I thought it was like just over 50%. We can double check on that. Anybody who hears this will get the answer long before they hear this because we'll probably come up with it. But I
they have a
wasn't sure.
controlling interest.
Yeah, but controlling interest is 50% plus one. That just means that they own more than anybody else, and they own more than half, which means they can't be outvoted by the other minority owners and have them band their percentage worth and outvote Fenway Sports Group. Controlling just means you own more than 50%. So with that said, right, so I had raised some concerns. I know we had talked about it, that when they were interested and it came out it came out publicly that they were looking into ownership stake in the Penguins. Not sure if they even had said what percentage, but that they wanted to buy in and be serious with the Penguins. My immediate concern was that this was going to impact and affect the ability of them to financially invest in the Red Sox organization. So this was long before John Henry had mentioned possibly teaming up with LeBron about the NBA team in Vegas, the whole PGA thing that came out within the last few months. So, I mean, the optics are certainly bad, right? You can say, well, the amount of money that the Penguins spend has nothing to do with how much money the Red Sox can spend. And sure, yes, they are different leagues. It's different pools of funds. However, when you are the owner of a business, okay, and rudimentarily speaking, sports teams are a business. John Henry and the Fenway Sports Group's primary interest in being an owner is making money and having a profitable asset that someday is worth more than what it was when they bought it. So, at a very base level, their goal is to just turn a profit. So, when you own a business, the money that you make as an individual, your salary comes from the profits of your assets. So when you are an owner and you profit $1 million, you can decide how much of those profits, to a degree, right? Like if you have investors and stakeholders, you have to pay them out. So that's kind of a different story. But when you're just turning a straight profit without having to worry, when you've paid off your investors and your stakeholders and your stockholders, whatever's left over, you can decide how much of that money is yours, right? So like my wife owns her own company, so she can essentially choose her own salary. Her company can profit, not that it ever has, it's still relatively young, but say her company profits $500,000. That's not her salary. She can leave that money in an escrow account and the value of the company goes up and pay herself $100,000 and just have $400,000 in profits lying around to invest. Sure. But to say that like the money that the Penguins make, John Henry and Fenway Sports Group, doesn't impact the Red Sox, no, there's no direct correlation, but his intake, his profit, his revenue, his salary is one giant pool of money. And he can decide how much of that money is divvied up between Liverpool, the Red Sox, the Penguins, how much money that him and the contingent, I guess they're calling it, how much of his money he wants to put into that pool of money to buy controlling stake in PGA Live. So the optics of this whole situation look really, really bad because even if we were just playing the guessing game, okay, we had talked ad nauseum that the Red Sox were probably operating, and when I say the Red Sox, that Heimblum was probably operating with some kind of a budget. It wasn't just, hey, we want to stay at the luxury tax. You can spend up to, and I don't know what it was last year. It was like 232 or 230.
Yeah, 232.
Something like that, right? So they weren't saying, yeah, you can spend up to the luxury tax, but stay under it because we don't want to pay any penalties. He had I mean, granted, it was close. It was 225, which is 7 million shy of the luxury tax. Even before we knew that there was a hard number, we were guessing that there was some kind of number that we didn't know. I think we kind of already figured out that when you have that situation in front of you with the Sox, and then you see investments in the Penguins and possible investments in an NBA expansion team, and now with PGA Live, the optics of that are very, very bad because you're saying that your principal, like you're named the Fenway Sports Group, you're the primary owner of the Red Sox. That was your first investment, and that's the one that now I don't know how much money relative to, I don't know, does the NHL have a cap like the NFL or a tax like MLB? It's a
The
cap,
NHL,
right?
yeah, they have a cap. It's like
So
80 something million.
it's 80 to 85 million dollars. So where I'm going with this is I don't know how much money the Penguins spend relative to that number, but having to worry about that impacts how much money John Henry and his group want to divvy up for every organization. Now, sure, of his assets, I mean, I don't know what his PGA Live responsibilities would be under this new agreement. Obviously, he's got more money possibly at his disposal for the Red Sox, but it's still a general pool of funds that he has to decide. I have X amount of hundreds of millions of dollars. How do I want to spend it, and where do I want to put my money? Because he's got other investments too. He's not just a sports team owner.
Well, I think like whether how does it matter how many people want to like try to fight the concept that they're not related? The basic how to put this down into let's put this in the simplest terms possible. He decides, John Henry, Fenway Sports Group, Tom Werner, they decide how much money they're investing in the Boston Red Sox every year. Doesn't matter. Put all the other investments and all that right next to it and say they decide how much money they're going to invest in this team. Some years we get it, like 2020, even like 2021, like we kind of understood those years of why they didn't invest. They were in shambles as a roster and payroll.
Right. And then you had COVID cost them 2/3 of a season.
Yeah.
So their revenue was down like that. Like that made sense. Those seasons to me weren't red flags for that reason.
But what people need to just like recognize is like they try to make things so complicated. It's not. John Henry, Tom Werner, Fenway Sports Group decide how much money they're going to invest in this team every single year. They sit down, they're saying, this is what we're going to be willing to do. Whether it's a strict budget or, we're going to go over the tax and it's going to be in this range type of thing. Obviously, that can change depending on, free agents, whatever. It doesn't have to be always a hard line. Last year, it seemingly was. This year, there seems to be some type of hard line. But they decide how much money they're investing in this ball club. And so when you come out and you have the president of the Boston Red Sox, Sam Kennedy, saying they're, quote, probably going to have a lower payroll in 2024 than they had in 2023, which was already a payroll below the tax. When the team is on the verge of, if you just spent some damn money, you could actually build a playoff quality team. So when you have that in place, and then you don't spend the money, and at the same time you come to an agreement that you're going to commit $2 billion with a B billion dollars into another investment, another sports entity. You don't even want to call it a team in the PGA, obviously, because they're not teams, but another sports world.
You're investing into another major sports governing body.
You know what? It doesn't even have to be sports. Like they could have been investing like technology or something. It doesn't really matter. What it comes down to is
could have brought
you're not
FTX back from the
investing.
dead.
Yeah, you're not investing in the Boston Red Sox, and you're investing in other things. So no matter how much you want to tell me that it's not the same thing, they're not connected, they're not investing in the Red Sox. So when you turn and people see this thing, people are going to be pissed off, and it's going to create headlines. So don't come to me on social media and be like, "Oh, they're not related. They're blah 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 blah." It doesn't matter if they're technically related or not.
Right,
He's not investing in the Red Sox, and
right,
he's
he's
investing in other things.
he's prioritizing another, because obviously, like, golf's not going away, right?
No.
So he's investing long term, which is why he's committing somewhere. I think the exact verbiage was the deal was going to approach $3 billion. So you can expect that it's closer to 3 than it is to 2. So he's choosing to invest. And I don't know, because I know it's not just him, right? I don't know how much of that amount of money
For
is his.
example, Wick Roseback is part of this, the owner of the Celtics.
Yeah.
It's not stopping him from investing.
No. And he's just choosing, right? He's choosing to invest money, and we'll see what kind of investments they make. They still have some room to play down at the Garden, but it all comes back to choices, right? Like John Henry could very easily choose to invest a little bit more into the Red Sox, and he's not. And again, whether you want to say they're connected or not, which I have yet to hear an argument for that they're not connected that makes sense. You can say, oh, well, he just takes money he makes from the Penguins and keeps it in the NHL. It's like, well, you don't know. Because at the end of the day, his profits from one organization to the other are in one. We just looked this up. He's worth $1.2 billion. If you think that he's keeping his money separate, you don't understand how somebody who's worth that amount of money, what they're paying somebody to manage their money does. That money is in one pool, and investments are divvied up into a variety of different. They have
pretty
diverse
simple.
portfolios, but to think that the Penguins' revenue stream and the Red Sox revenue streams are separate, like, that's just a naive line of thinking. But again, he can choose to separate if he wants. But the fact of the matter is, and you hit the nail on the head perfectly, he's choosing to commit billion. Well, again, I don't know what his slice of the pie is, but
It's going to be at least like
he's
1.5 to 2.
He's contributing. Let's be conservative and say hundreds of millions, approaching probably $1 billion or more in current and future assets into what he thinks is a long-term business savvy decision. I can't no sports aside, I wish I had the ability to do those things myself. I wish
Yeah,
I could
because
diversify and
you know
right.
what
But as a
what
casual
really needs
fan,
is 70-something-year-old John Henry really needs to get into golf. Like that's what he needs in his life right now,
yeah,
is to invest in fucking golf.
right. He's trying to set, his, the future generations of Henrys up for success.
He owns the Penguins and the Red Sox in Liverpool already.
Yeah, he
It doesn't
doesn't.
matter. They're all going to be set for life. It doesn't matter.
Right. Well, what does somebody with what does somebody with money need and want? More money. There's never
Yeah.
enough money. But like, he's choosing to invest significant financial assets into something that's not the Red Sox, which from a fan perspective is not what you want to see. You look at an organization that suffered through years of mediocrity, years of being in the basement. I mean, obviously, we know 1918 through 2004, and there were peaks and valleys over those 86 years. I've talked to my dad all the time. They had 67 and 86, and they started this run of relevance kind of more again in like the late 90s when they started to make the playoffs every year, and then Dan Duquette sells the team, and this current ownership group retained the direction of the organization from 20 years ago, when it was, we're going to commit money, we're going to win, and we're going to move forward. The issue I have now is they've gotten away from that. So you have an organization that was once committed. They had, and again, take it with
The
a
Red
grain of
Sox were
salt,
their
right?
priority.
Right. They had years of, I'll say, sellouts. They may have sold a seat if somebody may or may not have decided to go to the game, whatever. But they had the MLB record for most consecutive sellouts. Take it with a grain of salt. Again, one of the smallest, if not the smallest, ballparks in all of baseball. So not exactly like they're selling out a 50,000 stadium arena, right? 50,000 seat arena. but they've completely gotten away from that, and it's frustrating as a fan when Fenway is on average, when you break down the numbers, the most expensive ballpark to go to for a family of four. When you factor in tickets, food, drinks, souvenirs, everything factored in, it's the most expensive ballpark on average per family to go to a baseball game, and the organization does not reinvest that money into not just the product on the field, but your experience at the ballpark. Now, Fenway has nostalgia. It's the second oldest operating ballpark in all of baseball, so there's a lore there. But they don't invest in the organization in multiple different ways, and it's frustrating as a fan that the long-term financial benefit of a diverse portfolio is taking priority over a competitive product on the field that puts butts in people's seats. So yeah, just I'm still here. Frustrating experience. As a fan, to kind of see where we're at. Like you said, Whit Grossbeck has no problem with being part of the PGA Live group, leading the group to buy them or be a controlling, governing influence. I forget. Word vomit here, but he has no problem. He's committing between Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. He's committing what, $65 million a season ish.
It's gonna be way more than that going forward.
Well, no, because they both make north of 30. They both make between 30 and 35 a year. Once Tatum's salary kicks in, it's going to be. Oh no! I'm sorry. It's
Brown's in the 60s.
It's going to be 100. Sorry, I went the wrong way with that. It's going to be 100 and like.
Once Tatum's new deal,
130,
120 plus,
130 a year between the two of them, because Brown makes what, 62 and a half, and what's Tatum's new deal, 65?
I don't think he hasn't signed it yet.
Well,
he's not even eligible. He will.
Projected, it'll probably be closer to 63 to 65, something like that.
Yeah.
So that's 130 million dollars a year between two guys. And what's the NBA salary cap?
There isn't. Well, there is, but it's like 100 and it's like 180 something, I think, like that.
Yeah,
but
I think
they could go over it for their own players.
Yeah, so I think that I ran the numbers when they signed Porzingis in the offseason that based on the projected value of Tatum's contract in 2025, 2024, 2025 season, that it was like 93 or 94% of the available money based on the NBA's salary cap was committed to those three guys. And that we would, and we dove down the rabbit hole of what they were going to deal with in terms of financial restrictions. But yeah, you look at somebody like Grossbeck, who has no problem offering a supermax contract to two players in back-to-back seasons. And
it comes down to commitment to win. I think it's really that simple. It's just commitment to win.
And to come back to what they determine their commitment to win is, they came out, and we've talked about this already, that their goal is to essentially build around the core of the guys that are coming up between now and next season. Because I would guess, based on, assuming health and player development, that Mayer, Roman Anthony, and Teal will probably both be on the all three will probably be on the roster by mid to end of 2025. And that's waiting on Teal because he hasn't even been in the organization for a year yet. He was just drafted in June. So
yeah, he's more advanced. Teal might end up being the first one up.
I mean, maybe based on need. Mayer struggled in Double-A last year with injuries and whatnot.
Well, also just like development. Like, he's 22 already. He's about to be 23.
That's true. Was Roman Anthony a high school kid?
Yeah.
Okay,
I think he's. I don't even know if he turned 20 yet. He's very young. But anyways, we could shift gears just a tiny bit. But speaking of owners, and this kind of plays a big factor again into the Red Sox not spending money. The Baltimore Orioles are being sold to two billionaires. I mean, we don't need to get into this, extensively, but the fact of the matter is the AL East has the Rays, who's small market, but they're always good because they develop right and do it right.
Yep.
The Blue Jays spend they're
a
not a
decent.
top of the market, but
They're a decent. They were a top 10 payroll team last year, I believe.
yeah, they were high. Yeah, they were higher than the Red Sox.
I think they were
They're
7th last year.
they're spending more money. The Yankees are the number one payroll in baseball, or second highest payroll in baseball behind the Dodgers. And now the Baltimore Orioles, who are notoriously a bottom 2 or 3 payroll, they are going to be sold to 2 different billionaires.
Toronto was 7th.
We don't know what that means exactly in terms of what their uh, commitment and how much they'll be spending going forward. In the end, like they're still not a big market in this, you know what I mean? So like I'm not sitting here expecting the Orioles to be like top 5 spenders all of a sudden because they have 2 new owners. But if they get into the middle of the pack and become a middle of the pack spending team where their payroll jumps into the 150 to 180 range, like that's a huge difference that you're battling now in the AL
Yeah.
East.
Yeah, and I mean, were you just throwing that number out there?
Yeah. If
Okay.
I just said middle of the pack, like if they became a 150 to 180 million payroll
Yeah.
team, which would probably put
Yeah.
them in like the 17 to 20 range.
It's higher than that actually. Minnesota at 17 was 153 million, and then 180 million would make them the 14th
Yeah,
highest
so
salary.
14. Yeah, so exactly middle of the pack.
Yeah, but
14 to 17
and the
range.
reason I ask is they spent 60 million last year, so like that's a huge jump. I mean, obviously they'd have to work up to that. I think. It all depends on how much money they want to.
Even if they're at
They
like
want.
120 million, like that's a big difference for an
Yeah, if you double
organization
your.
that
Yeah, yeah,
has a top payroll, I mean top farm system in baseball. Like that can now they're going to start spending a little bit more money. They got a great young core. They got the number one prospect in baseball um and Justin Jackson Holiday.
Jackson
Jackson
Holiday,
Jackson Holiday. Uh
and he's got a younger brother that might be better than he is.
yeah, the fact of the matter is it's not good. It's not good. So if you have another team now in the AL East and in the AL in general that's spending more money, they're going to be probably better. That means that like Rutschman and Gunnar Henderson and who's the other guy I'm having a mind blank?
Well, this Jackson. I mean, obviously Jackson Holiday.
Yeah, there was one other.
Mullins,
I'm
maybe.
having a mind, but anyways, like these guys went from they're probably going to be out of Baltimore in a couple of years, 2 or 3, 4 years, because they're going to need a new contract. Now they might not.
Right,
Those
and
guys
that's
might be in the AL East for years to come.
yeah. So it's a huge wild card because you don't know what this new ownership group is going to do when it comes to the Orioles. Which, I mean, I'm not going to pretend to know the inner workings of how the Orioles decide to spend money. My guess is that they probably spend at the bottom of the league because their revenue streams are not super high, and the owner doesn't want to commit a ton of his own extra dollars outside of what the team brings in order to invest. But who knows what these other two guys are going to decide to do? They could Steve Cohen it in the beginning and spend on guys. Maybe they might wait a little bit. We may not know, but
either way, it just can't be really a good thing.
No, it's either going to stay the status quo or they're going to invest more, and now you have 4 teams. You're going to be legitimately competing against the other 4 teams in your division for players every single season.
Yeah, but I mean, we'll keep it that simple. Let's transition into the New England Patriots. Since the last time we spoke, it basically got announced that DeMarcus Covington is getting the DC job. I know we all basically gave the stamp of approval that he was our choice. So, what are your kind of thoughts on that move? And then the next question I have for you is: do you want Steve and Brian Belichick back on the New England defensive, coaching staff?
So we'll start with Covington. I think it's certainly the right move. There's still a little voice in the back of my head that says, it'd be nice to have, somebody fresh with outside ideas that isn't somebody who came up within the same system. But the defense isn't the issue, so I don't really. That's not a hill that I'll die on. Different story for the offense, but we can maybe get into that later. Obviously, he's young. I think he's only what 34, if I'm not
something like
mistaken.
that.
He's younger than Mayo.
37, I think.
But I know,
But
nah,
that
I
might
don't.
be Mayo.
Mayo's 37. I think Covington's 34. I'm pretty sure he's younger than Mayo.
Yeah, he's
Um,
34, 1989.
so, um, I think for a guy that's that age,
He'll
he's
be
certainly
he'll be 35 just for the hell of it. He'll be 35 in about 2 months.
okay. So he's well respected within the organization. Again, the defense was not the issue. So if you have somebody who is in house and you want to run the same defensive scheme, and you're familiar with a guy and you're happy with the job he did last year, which kind of hard to say that you couldn't be, unless he had some character problems, which there's no indication of that. The defensive line was, well, they didn't put up elite numbers. I think that they were arguably the most consistent day in and day out positional group on either side of the ball, and that includes special teams too. So certainly fine with the move. I like the youth movement. Get these younger guys in. Um, as far as Steve and Brian go, I'm kind of indifferent. I kind of go back to wanting, like fresh new ideas. But again, the defense wasn't the problem, so it's not like I want necessarily feel like changing the defense is necessary. Um, I know we always kind of poo-pooed on Bill's nepotism a little bit, so I think it's kind of awkward if they're still here and he's not, only because like the only reason that they were here was because their dad was the head coach for 24 years. So take that with a grain of salt. I guess it doesn't really bother me one way or the other. And not to go like too far off on a tangent, unless you want to dive down the rabbit hole a little bit. Um, I don't love that, at least on the surface, with what they've been doing since Bill left. It gives off the vibe that when I say they, I mean the Crafts, believe that Bill was really the sole culprit behind why they've struggled for 4 years. Because I mean, again, like, don't necessarily have to unless you want to dive into the rabbit hole. They're going to retain Wolf and Grow and let them run player personnel and be de facto GMs, I guess. They're obviously they promoted from within with their head coach. They promoted from within with their presumably promoted from within with their defensive coordinator. Every indication is that he has the job. They just haven't made a formal announcement yet. And then today there was talk on the radio that Josh McDaniels might be your offensive coordinator, which is like that. I'm
So
kind of indifferent to that whole idea. I just
Greg
think
Bernard said on Felger and Maz that he sees McDaniels as unlikely.
okay. So Zolak said that he got the impression that McDaniels might be the offensive coordinator. I'm kind of at a point where I'd kind of like him to shit or get off the pot at this point. They've interviewed 8 guys for offensive coordinator, and we still don't have one. Now, granted, there were extenuating circumstances. Obviously, my guess is that Zach Robinson was a soft interest, and I say that because as soon as Raheem Morris got the head coaching job in Atlanta, Zach Robinson was immediately on his way to Atlanta to talk to Morris about being the offensive coordinator. So it seemed to me that he and Morris all along had kind of this backdoor agreement that if Morris got a head coaching job, that Robinson would be the offensive coordinator. And I'm not saying that that's good, bad, or indifferent, but when you know a guy and he's getting a head coaching job, and obviously Robinson did really good things in LA as pass game coordinator, so it only logically makes sense. Plus, and I don't know what his role was with the Rams, but the defensive coordinator in Atlanta is somebody that worked under Raheem Morris as defensive coordinator in LA. So he kind of brought like 2 major players from the Rams staff with him to Atlanta. So I feel like there's, as weird as this analogy is, it kind of feels a little bit like the Red Sox GM search, where because of other extenuating circumstances, they may not end up with the offensive coordinator that they targeted from the beginning, because that particular person's number one choice may not have been New England. But I'm kind of at a point where like they've fulfilled their obligations in terms of the offensive coordinator search. So I'm kind of at a point where I'm curious why they haven't made a decision. There's like this is a pure hunch, is that I think their number one choice all along was Steve Waldron. And when he left for Chicago, they kind of had to start over. That they had made their interviews. I really think that they had an offer out to Waldron. I think I have a hunch he was their top choice. Breer brought it up. The Athletic talked about him being an option because he was the offensive coordinator in Seattle, so he has the experience. He's not a young guy, but he's not an aging guy either. I think he's 44, 45 years old. So we kind of fit that, he's been around for a while, but he's not a dinosaur. So it kind of just fit the mold perfectly. And I think when he decided he was going to take the Bears OC job, that kind of threw a monkey wrench into their plans. I really think that they wanted him to be their offensive coordinator. My guess is that somebody like a Zach Robinson was probably choice number 2, and they were just waiting and hoping maybe that Bill got the Atlanta job so that Raheem didn't steal Zach Robinson somewhere else. But I'm at a point where it's like, you've interviewed all these guys, like you got to make a decision. There's no way that you've interviewed all these guys and you still don't know, like, what's your contingency plan? We're sitting here, we're talking about, like, is it going to be Josh McDaniels? Is it going to be Nick Caley, who is from the McVay system? And, I don't want to talk out of both sides of my mouth because I like people that come out of the McVay system, but he used to be here. He was the only guy that Bill blocked from taking interviews when McDaniels left for Vegas. And then he finally left. He took the tight end job in LA, and now he may or may not be up for OC. I would have preferred somebody with experience, but somebody who learned under the McVay system, is fine by me. I just like they're at a point where I'm at a point where you've already interviewed all the guys that you could possibly interview, so make a decision.
Yeah, so I mean, I think they're waiting to announce Covington until they hire an OC. And I think that's going to come within the next, I would probably say within the next 48 hours. Greg Bedard kind of emphasized that on the radio today with Felger and Maz. He said probably by the end of the week. So I would say probably within the next 48 hours. I know Luke Getsy.
They said that last week, and then nothing happened. They said it the week before, and nothing happened. They've been saying for like a week and a half that the Patriots were going to make their decisions, which is why that's why I think that they wanted Waldron, because he hadn't made a decision yet.
Yeah, so Nick Caley came in for an interview in person. Him and Jeremy Springer, I think his name is. He's the assistant special teams guy in LA. Luke Getsy came to New England. He was the old Chicago OC. He's going to New Orleans. He came to New England to interview for a second time today, and he's going to New Orleans to interview for a second time with the Saints tomorrow. I don't know what the exact holdup is. I still bet that it's going to be Nick Caley. We talked about our top option. Zach Robinson was our top option. Gerard Johnson was he was with the Caley as my 2 or 3 option. He is now off the board. He is returning to Houston. Basically, I expect them to make a decision within the next day or two. I think most likely it's Nick Caley, but I also think that they're very interested in bringing in a veteran around him. And, maybe Luke Getsy is that type of person. Maybe it's Josh McDaniels. Maybe they're trying to basically set that up too, of like, okay, if we're going to go with Nick Caley, like we want to make sure we have a veteran that can help him along the way too.
Yeah. So real quick, so the guys that they interviewed, that don't currently have a job are Thomas Brown, Brian Fleury, and Luke Getsy. Are the only guys they've interviewed for OC that either are staying put. I'm sorry, that either aren't staying where they're at or didn't already get a job. So the list that I have is Zach Robinson, Dan Pitcher, Shane Waldron, Thomas Brown, Gerard Johnson, Brian Fleury, and Luke Getsy as the candidates that interviewed. So obviously, Robinson, Pitcher, Waldron, and Johnson are off the board because, as you just mentioned, Gerard Johnson is staying put. As is it Bobby Slowick is not leaving Houston. He's the quarterbacks coach or OC. No, Gerard Johnson was quarterbacks coach. Slowick was the offensive coordinator.
Yeah.
So if you're going to go off of the guys that they interviewed, you're choosing from Thomas Brown, Brian Fleury, and Luke Getsy, unless your plan is that if those are not the three guys that you're looking for, you can call McDaniel. Like McDaniels doesn't have to interview for this job.
No, and that's why him not
interested,
officially interviewing is like doesn't mean anything.
Right. So again, but like that's kind of what you're down to. Like they're down to, and I don't know in what order they prioritize those guys, but you're essentially down to, you lost your top three choices, more or less. I don't know how high up the list Dan Pitcher was, but he was the guy we talked about. He got the OC job in Cincinnati.
Yeah, so there's Engstrand is in Detroit. He's pass game coordinator. Brian Johnson's not leaving, supposedly. I heard
he told
I heard a whisper that he's still at least talking to Washington, but we'll see. So it looks like he is probably staying. Does that open up Engstrand into, if Johnson left, then I don't think he was going to be leaving Detroit because he would probably get a promotion. But now he could, be more open to taking a promotion. They interviewed Clint Kubiak in San Francisco.
Officially interviewed him?
Yes. Him and Brian Frary, I believe it was. I can see if I can pull it up. Mike Kadlick usually is pretty good with this.
So Pat's Pulpit, which is Brian Hines, on what's today's date? The 30th. So yesterday. There was a rumor. He posted an article on the website at a little after 11 a.m. and it's titled "Clint Kubiak reportedly interviews for Patriots offensive coordinator position." It says newest name on the list is 49ers pass game specialist Clint Kubiak. Kubiak, 36, spent his entire coaching career on the offensive side of the ball. Included time at the collegiate level as well as NFL experience with both the Vikings and the Broncos. He was
it's Kubiak and Scott Turner. He was with the Raiders last year as a pass game coordinator.
Okay. I mean, I'd be more interested in Kubiak. But what's interesting, right, is here's why I'm not 100% sure if I think that's correct. So I don't know the time frame of this, but there was a report last week that just
for it was Brea that reported it.
Okay, so there was a report last week, and I forget who it was from. It was from Schefter, Rappaport, Breeder, like one of those guys of that ilk, and it had said something to the effect of it tied into the Seahawks and Commanders search for a head coach, and that they had missed their window to interview them prior to championship weekend. So the only way that they could interview them is if they don't win the AFC or NFC championship. So I guess I'm going to blank on his name. Mike McDonald was high up on Seattle's list, I believe. And the reason it was concerning was because Seattle didn't get a chance to interview him prior to, I want to say it was like, I think he had up until Wednesday to interview a coach who's still in the playoffs. And they didn't do it. So if the Ravens had beaten Kansas City on Sunday, they would not, you can't interview coaches for openings if they're in the Super Bowl after championship weekend. So
it could have happened last week and just like it didn't get leaked out.
Yeah.
A lot of these Pats interviews we haven't heard until after.
Yeah. So depending on the timing of everything, so theoretically, right, like Kubiak can't interview with other teams until after the Super Bowl in just under 2 weeks. So, I mean, given what they've done in San Francisco, I mean, not really knowing a ton about Kubiak, he'd probably be near the top of my list. He's from that Shanahan McVay tree, and granted, there's a ton of weapons in San Francisco, but he's making Brock Purdy look really, really good. And I'm going to not say that Brock Purdy's not talented. He was a decently rated prospect coming out of Iowa State, but he's Mr. Irrelevant. So not a ton of teams liked him. So, but I mean, again, doesn't necessarily mean anything. Obviously, Brady was pick 199, and look what happened to him. Obviously, anything can happen to anybody if you put the work in. But the offense runs pretty well out in Santa Clara. So he might be a guy that kind of vaults towards the top of my list. If it's actually true, then he would be a guy that I would say goes pretty close to the top of the list for me for guys that I'd be interested in being offensive coordinator.
Yeah, so I mean, of who's available,
and who's the
still
OC,
available?
Who's the OC in San Francisco?
I'm
gonna look it up right now.
I'm having a mind. Oh God, what's
Chris
his name?
Forrester.
Yeah. There you go.
Who?
So
wait, that may not be right. Hold on. Kyle Shanahan.
No. Kubiak is a pass game coordinator.
Yeah, so it says Chris Forrester is in the first year of run game coordinator / offensive line coach.
Do they have a standard?
So QB coach is Brian Greasy. Where is he? So Clint Kubiak is the assistant QB coach and pass game coordinator.
Yes, I don't think they have an official OC.
So it must be that Forrester is the one that. Well, actually,
no, it's Shanahan that calls the
plays. Shanahan calls plays, but so I guess technically Kubiak would report to Shanahan. In terms of the offensive game plan.
Correct.
But whatever, right?
They have Anthony Lynn on that staff.
He sucks.
They also interviewed Brian Fleury, who is the tight ends coach in San Francisco.
Okay. Quick little fun factoid. The Broncos of the late 90s, Ed McCaffrey and Mike Shanahan won rings, and now the sons of both of those guys might win a ring in 2 weeks.
Yeah, I saw that. That's pretty cool.
Little funky, little keep it in the family thing. Obviously, for the same reason that Adam Peters was a hot name to be the next GM of a team, the 49ers are that hot team where, the young creative offensive minds, they're one of those teams. Same with Cincinnati, same with the Rams. Zach Taylor, was he a McVay guy or a Shanahan guy? He came from the McVay system, correct? Not that they're
who?
Zach Taylor, the head coach of Cincinnati.
He came from McVay.
He was under McVay, right? Yeah. So, and not that they're a ton different, but I'm sure McVay does things a little bit differently than Shanahan does. But yeah, so Cincinnati's got those guys. Obviously, Callahan just got a head coaching job. Pitcher obviously got the promotion. He was a hot name for a few seconds. So, the 49ers are, they've got, maybe the next wave of guys because they're learning under Shanahan, and maybe if Kubiak is in fact interviewing, do we know how many teams he's interviewed for offensive coordinator?
I don't off the top of my head.
So maybe he wants to come to New England. Would be nice.
Basically, to kind of wrap up the OC, of those still available, it's Nick Healy, Luke Getsy, Thomas Brown, Tanner Engstrand, Scott Turner, Brian Fleury, and Clint Kubiak. I don't know. I'm not going to sit here and act like I know a ton about Tanner Engstrand, Scott Turner, Brian Fleury, and Clint Kubiak. I know a bit about, obviously, Getsy and Thomas Brown because they were both OCs last year. In a perfect world, at this point, I do like Nick Haley as the choice. Clint Kubiak's probably number 2. But I would really like them to bring in someone who's done it before. Next to him. So in a perfect world, I do like the idea of, let's say Nick Haley as the OC, and then you bring in someone like Thomas Brown to work with running backs and be a run game coordinator, and then you bring in I don't know, maybe what was Luke Getzey before he was OC? What did he work with? I
I'm
can
not
look it
sure.
up.
I was looking um, at Kubiak. The most prominent thing that came up when I looked him up for interviews is that both him, the Raiders requested an interview 2 days ago. I don't know. I don't think they can interview him until after the Super Bowl at this point because I think they've missed the deadline. And then the other one was both him, Kubiak, and Brian Greasy interviewed for the Saints offensive coordinator position.
Okay.
So
So he yeah,
so Getsy was the quarterbacks coach and pass game coordinator for Green Bay for 2 years.
yeah, so if him in
After
that same
serving as
role,
so
like
I mean
if he gets an
I
OC offer, he's going to take that, but
yeah, I mean I wouldn't mind it. I mean he's got a ton of history. He has a lot of history as wide receivers coach, both collegiately and at the pro level. He got his first pro job with the Packers as a offensive quality control coach for 2 years, then got promoted to wide receivers coach. Then he went back to college. He was the offensive coordinator and OC coach at Mississippi State for one season. Um, then he went back to Green Bay as the QB coach. Then eventually got promoted to pass game coordinator on top of the QB coach. And then prior to being let go by the Bears, um, I'm sorry, prior to being let go, he was offensive coordinator for 2 years in Chicago. So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't mind, bringing in him, and he's relatively young still. I think he's only 39, 40 in that range. So, somebody who, maybe he's a quarterbacks coach, pass game coordinator, and you have Kubiak or Greasy. I don't know if he interviewed for the past job, but maybe Kubiak's your OC and Getsy is your coordinator, but or because I'm gonna guess that if Kubiak is gonna leave, he's not leaving San Francisco for a lateral move. I'm going to assume he would leave. He would stay in San Francisco if his options are to stay as a pass game coordinator. He's not going to leave, I don't think, unless he gets an OC job. So I could see something where, because of his history, Getsy is like your QB coach slash pass game coordinator, and then you've got Kubiak, who's your offensive coordinator. You're muted.
sorry, I had to walk downstairs. I'm
Oh,
open
good.
to a few different paths, obviously. In the end, I want something that's a little different. That's why, like, I'm not all right. Like, we don't need to go down the Josh McDaniels path again. That's not my preference. Not that I think he's going to be a bad option, but basically, I think Nick Caley would be my top option at this point. And if they could bring in, a Thomas Brown and a Luke Getsy to be kind of aides to him, I think that's a decent core. Now, it's a
Thomas
little
Brown's
unorthodox.
he's from the Panthers.
Yeah, but he came from the Rams.
Let's see, former OC
So
with Carolina. Um,
he was
what was
assistant
he?
head coach in LA.
And running backs coach. He was also the tight ends coach in 2022 before Caley took the job.
Yeah.
Um,
So I mean, he has the experience. He could be like a run game coordinator, help him out. Again, if these guys get OC job offers, they're probably taking that over a pass game guy or a run game coordinator.
so speaking of the
Uh,
Panthers, just because you brought it up, from Adam Schefter as of 10 minutes ago, Panthers have reached agreements with 4 offensive coaches, including assistant head coach and run game coordinator Harold Goodwin. They also added running back coach Bernie Parmalee, wide receiver coach Rob Moore, and offensive line coach Joe Gilbert. So nothing on Thomas Brown, but they seem to be making coaching decisions. So
yeah,
they've
Thomas Brown's probably going to be looking for a new job elsewhere. So like that. That's really what it comes down to. These, my top. I'd say definitely my top option, and then two or three on that list are probably off the board. Nick Haley was like my number three, maybe number two option. I like the idea of him because I think he has, he's someone that Mayo trusts and knows he can come in, fit in pretty easily. He actually knows still most of this, staff and this all the players offensively, and at the same time, he spent a year with McVay, and people say like a year's not that long, but like you're there every single day. Like
it's
you
better than
you
nothing.
learn you learn a lot in a year. Yeah, people act like you can't learn an offense in a full season. It doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. So he's probably pretty
Yeah.
well versed. And as people, it's kind of been mentioned a few times. I know I talked about it last night a little bit on the other Foxborough fellas pod. But the tight end position, when you're coaching it, you kind of have to learn a little bit of everything. You have to learn the run game. You have to learn the pass game. You have to learn, obviously, route running, everything. You're not doing comparatively to if you're just quarterback or just wide receiver or just running back coach. Like you got to do a little bit of everything.
Yep.
Sean McVay was a tight ends coach before he kind of climbed up the ladder. Uh,
Did not
long
know that.
story short, Nick Caley's kind of my, he wasn't my number one option, but I would say happy, relatively happy with the choice. If they could bring in a veteran guy to help him, which I really think they're going to, that will make me a little even more comfortable with the position. And then, if they hire someone like Haley, you have a better idea what offense they're going to try to run. And I think it would be a little bit more of the Sean McVay, and then mix in a little bit of what Kaylee learned here in New England under the Josh McDaniels offense. Uh, blend those two together, maybe you get a pretty damn good scheme. And so, I'm optimistic about it. But like you said, I just want a decision.
Yeah. We're kind of at a point where, unless Kubiak blew your mind away when you interviewed the guy, make a decision.
Yeah, and we'll leave it at that. Yeah, so I mean, we'll wrap it up there for today. There's not much else going on. The Bruins are, cleaning house. In
Yes.
hockey, the
Celtics
Celtics
had a
are,
grind it out, come from behind win the other night. Did not
yeah,
look good
against
early.
against the biggest disappointment in sports, Zion Williamson. The guy has potential to be a goddamn superstar, and he just doesn't care enough to be a superstar.
Yeah.
But that's a whole nother topic.
And
Uh,
and
Go
score
ahead.
update, they are up 11 at the end of the first quarter over Indiana.
It is how do you say his name? Hyberton, whatever his name is, playing. I know he was going to be returning. I can't think. I forget how to say his last name. Tyler Hyberton.
Yeah.
He was like questionable to return. I don't know if he ended up returning. He's their best player, but yeah, no, they Celtics look good. Bruins look good. There's not ton to talk about with them. There is the
Halliburton
trick.
is
Yeah,
playing.
Halliburton. There it is. I
He's
don't know
1 of
why.
5 and 0 from 3, 0 of 3 from 3. He has 3 points and 3 assists at the end of the first quarter.
Yeah,
36-26 Celtics. Derek White, 6 of 9 for 15 points in the first quarter.
good. I'm glad he's back on track because he had a rough few games.
Nobody else really. Porzingis, 7.6 boards in the first quarter. Tatum, 4 points, 3 assists. That's pretty much it. Drew Holiday has 1 shot and he made his 3.
All right, all right. Is Brown playing?
Yeah, 3 of 7, 0 for 2 from deep.
Okay.
So he's got 7
Anyways, yeah.
points.
So we'll leave it at that. The Red Sox ownership sucks. Any final words on your end?
No. Hopefully next week we've got some pseudo breaking Pats news. We can talk about hopefully a couple of decisions that they made formally on coordinators. We've got just under 2 weeks until the Super Bowl, and then we've got nothing but off-season talk. And then we'll just we'll be on the off-season train and see where it goes.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, this was a good week. Be sure to check in next week. We'll be back again. But until then, we got this done in just under an hour. It's the goal usually, but we always end up pushing it well beyond that.
Yeah, we're a chatty bunch.
Yeah, no Jr. It's him. He's the one that keeps talking usually.
He's worth about 20 to 30 minutes of good quality content.
All right, check back next week. Thanks for listening.
Have a good night.